The Grumman F8F Bearcat was one of the most advanced piston-engine fighters ever built, yet it arrived too late to see combat in World War II. Designed as a successor to the F6F Hellcat, the Bearcat represented the peak of propeller-driven technology, emphasizing unmatched climb rate, agility, and raw power. Its design philosophy was simple but effective: create the smallest, lightest airframe possible around the most powerful available radial engine, the Pratt & Whitney R2008 100 double wasp. Historically, the Bearcat entered service in 1945, missing major wartime action by mere months. But if the F8F had entered service a year earlier, in 1944, it might have transformed the final phase of the Pacific War. During that period, the U.S. Navy faced fierce resistance from Japanese aircraft and deadly kamikaze attacks. An aircraft with the Bearcat's speed and climb rate could have offered a decisive advantage in intercepting these threats. The possibility raises fascinating questions. How would the Bearcat have altered air superiority, pilot survival rates, and the strategic tempo of naval warfare in the Pacific? This alternate history explores those consequences and the potential legacy of an earlier, arriving Bearcat. In reality, the Grumman F8F Bearcat's development began in 1943 after lessons learned from combat experience with the F6F Hellcat. U.S. Navy pilots demanded a lighter, faster interceptor that could outperform Japanese fighters like the A6M0 and Ki-84 The Bearcat's prototype first flew in August 1944, but production delays and testing meant it did not reach operational status before the war ended. If the Bearcat had been pushed into production 6 months earlier, perhaps with accelerated wartime urgency, the first squadrons could have seen combat by mid-1944, just in time for operations over the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Such timing would have placed the aircraft in pivotal battles where aerial dominance was contested daily. Earlier development might have required compromises in design refinement, but even with minor teething issues, its performance edge would have been significant. The Bearcat's combination of speed over 450 mph and climb rate nearly 50 ft per minute would have outclassed most Japanese fighters, offering a strategic edge during the war's closing stages. In this alternate scenario, the Bearcat's 1944 debut would have represented the ultimate expression of U.S. naval aviation superiority at a critical turning point. By mid-1944, American aircraft carriers were the most powerful striking force in the Pacific. Introducing the Bearcat at that time would have revolutionized carrier air group dynamics. Its compact size allowed for more aircraft to be stored aboard carriers compared to the bulkier Hellcat or Corsair. This efficiency could have increased sortie rates, giving U.S. fleets even greater air coverage and rapid response ability. The Bearcat's short takeoff distance and powerful engine made it exceptionally carrier-friendly, allowing quick launch and recovery even on smaller decks. During large-scale operations like the Battle of the Philippine Sea, where the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot occurred, squadrons of Bearcats might have intercepted Japanese raids more quickly and at higher altitudes. This would have reduced losses to kamikazes and long-range bombers, safeguarding valuable carriers and troop convoys. Additionally, the Bearcat's nimbleness would have improved pilot survivability during aerial engagements. An earlier deployment could have reshaped U.S. naval tactics, emphasizing high-speed interception and vertical combat superiority rather than the endurance and durability strategies favored with the Hellcat. In essence, the Bearcat's arrival in 1944 could have redefined how carrier warfare was conducted in the Pacific's closing years. In 1944, Japan's air forces were already struggling against the overwhelming industrial and technological might of the United States. However, elite Japanese pilots still posed a significant challenge, flying agile fighters such as the A6M50, Ki-84 and N1K2, J. Shiden, Kai. The introduction of the Bearcat would have been a nightmare for them. The Bearcat's top speed, roll rate, and climb ability far exceeded anything the Japanese fielded. In one-on-one engagements, a well-trained U.S. Navy pilot in a Bearcat would have easily dominated the skies. The aircraft's ability to climb quickly meant that American pilots could dictate when and where to engage, negating Japan's hit and run tactics. With Bearcats covering strike groups, Japanese airfields and supply lines could have been neutralized more efficiently. The psychological effect of such dominance cannot be overstated. Japanese morale, already under severe strain, would have declined further as their best aircraft and pilots were outclassed. Facing the Bearcat, Japan might have accelerated desperate measures such as increased kamikaze missions or attempts to deploy new prototype jets like the Nakajima Kiko sooner. Yet even then, the Bearcat's operational flexibility and performance would have kept American forces firmly in control of the skies. One of the greatest challenges of late World War II for the U.S. Navy was the kamikaze campaign. These suicide attacks inflicted heavy damage on ships, even with massive fighter screens deployed. The Bearcat's extraordinary climb rate and interception capability would have made it the ideal defensive fighter against such threats. In a 1944 scenario, when kamikaze attacks began in earnest during the Philippines campaign, Bearcat-equipped squadrons could have responded faster to incoming radar contacts, climbing to meet attackers before they reached fleet altitude. Its high speed and heavy armament, 4 20mm cannons, would have allowed for decisive kills in minimal time. This could have reduced the number of kamikaze aircraft breaking through the defensive perimeter, saving countless ships and lives. Moreover, its agility would have made it easier for pilots to re-engage targets in chaotic, multi-directional attacks. Faster interception meant less dependence on radar, directed fire, and anti-aircraft guns, improving overall fleet defense. If the Bearcat had been operational in 1944, the U.S. Navy's ability to neutralize kamikaze strikes would have been dramatically improved, possibly shortening the war's final naval campaigns by making Japanese suicide tactics less effective and far more costly. If the F8F Bearcat had reached operational status by 1944, major carrier battles such as those in the Philippines Sea and off Formosa would have been dramatically influenced. The Bearcat's superior speed and climb rate would have given U.S. carrier task forces an early intercept capability that no Japanese bomber or torpedo plane could have matched. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Bearcat squadrons could have intercepted enemy formations long before they reached attack range, reducing the need for dangerous close-in-ship defenses. The aircraft's remarkable acceleration would have allowed American pilots to transition between escorting strike groups and defending the fleet with unprecedented efficiency. This flexibility might have led to fewer American losses and even more decisive victories in the Pacific. The Bearcat could have transformed the tactical doctrines of the U.S. Navy, introducing a shift toward fast response interception and energy fighting. Japanese carrier remnants, already fragile after Midway and the Marianas, would have been annihilated faster, leaving Japan with virtually no naval aviation by early 1945. In this alternate history, the Bearcat doesn't just perform well, it completely redefines air combat aboard carriers, accelerating the U.S. Navy's transition into a new era of aerial dominance. An earlier introduction of the F8F Bearcat in 1944 could have reshaped U.S. aircraft design philosophy during and after World War II. Historically, aircraft like the F4U Corsair and F6F Hellcat embodied a balance of speed, ruggedness, and firepower, emphasizing survivability over raw performance. The Bearcat broke that mold by pursuing lightweight construction and blistering performance. Had it entered combat early, its success would have validated the lightweight interceptor concept, potentially influencing post-war designs. For example, early jet fighters such as the F9F Panther or F-86 Sabre might have adopted Bearcat-inspired aerodynamic principles sooner. Designers might also have extended the piston-engine era, refining hyper-performance propeller aircraft even as jets emerged. The Bearcat's combat data in 1944-45 could have provided invaluable insights into airframe stress, maneuverability, and climb optimization, advancing U.S. aeronautical research by years. Conversely, its success might have delayed full-scale jet adoption by making piston-engine fighters seem more viable in the short term. In this way, the Bearcat's early arrival could have subtly redirected the evolution of American air power, balancing between piston excellence and the dawning jet age. The Bearcat's arrival in 1944 would have also transformed U.S. Navy pilot training, transitioning from the F6F Hellcat or F4U Corsair to the Bearcat required mastering a more sensitive, higher performance machine. Instructors would have emphasized energy management, vertical maneuvering, and interception tactics suited to the aircraft's incredible climb rate. Training programs could have evolved to focus on boom and zoom engagements, high-speed attacks followed by rapid climbs, rather than prolonged turning battles. For combat pilots, the Bearcat's responsive controls and powerful engine would have boosted confidence, enabling more aggressive tactics and faster reaction times against kamikazes and enemy interceptors. Additionally, its simplified maintenance and shorter takeoff distance meant more frequent training sorties, enhancing pilot readiness. The psychological effect of flying such an advanced fighter should not be underestimated. Pilots flying Bearcats would have felt nearly invincible, reinforcing American air superiority morale. In combat, this advantage translates into better coordination, fewer losses, and higher mission success rates. Overall, the Bearcat's hypothetical 1944 service would have elevated both the skill and spirit of U.S. naval aviators, producing the most capable and confident fighter corps of the entire Pacific War. The F8F Bearcat's early arrival would inevitably raise comparisons with the F6F Hellcat and F4U Corsair, the two dominant American carrier fighters of 1944. The Hellcat was robust, easy to fly, and highly effective against the Japanese Zero, earning an impressive kill ratio. The Corsair was faster and more versatile, but had landing issues on early carriers. The Bearcat, in contrast, was designed for pure performance, lighter, faster, and capable of incredible climb rates. If introduced in 1944, it might have replaced the Hellcat on fleet carriers, while the Corsair continued to serve on smaller escort carriers and with the Marines. This division would have optimized naval aviation, combining the Bearcat's interception power with the Corsair's ground attack capabilities. However, the Bearcat's limited range compared to the Corsair might have restricted its use in long-range escort missions. Even so, its dominance in aerial defense and short-range superiority would have justified rapid adoption. The aircraft's speed advantage, often exceeding 450 mph, would have made it untouchable by any Japanese fighter, ensuring the U.S. maintained absolute control of the skies during 1944-45 campaigns. The Battle of Okinawa in early 1945 was one of the bloodiest and most desperate of the Pacific War, marked by relentless kamikaze assaults and fierce air battles. If Bearcats had been operational by late 1944, their presence at Okinawa would have been game-changing. Their rapid climb rate would have enabled them to intercept kamikazes long before they neared Allied fleets, reducing ship losses dramatically. The Bearcat's agility and firepower would have made it a lethal defensive tool against waves of suicide aircraft. Moreover, faster interceptions would have eased the burden on destroyer pickets and anti-aircraft crews, lowering overall casualties. With fewer ships damaged, the U.S. Navy could have maintained a tighter blockade and provided more consistent air cover for ground troops. This increased efficiency might have shortened the Okinawa campaign and reduced the intensity of kamikaze attacks. The psychological blow to Japanese forces, seeing their final defense tactic neutralized, could have accelerated their sense of inevitable defeat. In this alternate timeline, the Bearcat's presence might have not only changed tactics, but also hastened the Pacific War's end. If the Bearcat had arrived in 1944, Japan's entire air defense and production strategy would have faced a severe crisis. By that time, Japanese aircraft like the Zero and Kai-61 were already outmatched by American planes. The Bearcat's sudden appearance, with performance comparable to or exceeding late war prototypes like the Kai-84, would have forced Japan to accelerate desperate measures. Factories might have shifted even more urgently toward producing jet or rocket interceptors, such as the Nakajima Kicker or Mitsubishi J-8M. However, Japan lacked the industrial resources and fuel reserves to mass produce or effectively deploy these advanced designs. The psychological shock of facing yet another superior American fighter could have weakened Japan's resolve and led to earlier collapses of pilot morale. Commanders would have been forced to change tactics, perhaps relying more on night raids or kamikaze attacks instead of conventional aerial combat. Yet, even those adaptations would have proven futile against an enemy with the Bearcat's speed and interception capabilities. Japan's already crumbling air defense network would have completely disintegrated, leaving their cities and fleets even more vulnerable to American bombardment. The Bearcat, therefore, would have symbolized the technological gap Japan could no longer bridge. An early Bearcat introduction would have accelerated American understanding of lightweight, high-performance piston aircraft design. The Bearcat embodied engineering efficiency. It was 20% smaller and lighter than the Hellcat, but significantly faster and more agile. Its advanced construction techniques, such as improved aerodynamics, thinner wings, and weight-saving materials, demonstrated what wartime innovation could achieve. If tested in combat during 1944, the U.S. Navy and Grumman engineers would have gathered real-world data on performance limits, maintenance demands, and operational durability. This experience could have advanced American engineering knowledge by years, feeding directly into post-war research and the jet transition. Lessons learned from the Bearcat's design might have led to earlier development of hybrid piston jet concepts or improved airframes for early jets like the FJ Fury and F9F Panther. Moreover, combat-tested Bearcats would have shown that smaller, more efficient fighters could outperform bulkier designs, changing the mindset of aircraft manufacturers. The Bearcat's early service would not just have been a battlefield advantage, it would have been an invaluable engineering milestone, influencing the next generation of American aviation technology both in military and civilian applications. Strategically, the arrival of the Bearcat in 1944 could have accelerated the Allied victory in the Pacific. Faster air superiority would have made Japanese resistance on islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa far less effective. The Bearcat's dominance in the skies would have given American bombers and naval task forces greater operational freedom, enabling more frequent strikes on industrial and logistical targets deep within Japan. With reduced losses and faster campaign turnover, the U.S. could have advanced closer to Japan's home islands sooner. This accelerated timeline might have made the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki unnecessary, or at least less decisive, if Japan had already been brought to the brink of surrender through overwhelming air and naval power. Furthermore, fewer American casualties in 1944-45 might have influenced post-war policy, creating a more confident and unified U.S. military outlook entering the Cold War. Strategically, the Bearcat would have been more than a fighter. It would have been a symbol of unstoppable American innovation and air supremacy, potentially shortening the war by several months and altering the geopolitical dynamics of the post-war Pacific. The F8F Bearcat's 1944 debut would not only have impacted the United States Navy but also influenced other Allied air forces. British and French naval planners, impressed by its performance, might have sought access to the design under lease agreements. Royal Navy carriers operating in the Indian and Pacific Oceans could have fielded Bearcats to replace older Seafires and Hellcats, giving them renewed combat capability. The Royal Air Force, while primarily focused on Europe, would have closely studied the Bearcat's design features, possibly applying similar concepts to late war projects like the Hawker Fury and Sea Fury. The French Navy, which did use Bearcats post-war in Indochina, could have begun earlier integration, changing their early post-war colonial campaigns. In this alternate timeline, the Bearcat might have served as the first truly multinational carrier-based fighter, symbolizing Allied technological unity. Its impact would have gone beyond combat. It would have established a shared foundation for post-war naval aviation design, influencing European and American collaboration well into the jet age. The Bearcat's early success would thus have been both a military triumph and a catalyst for broader international technological exchange. The presence of the Bearcat in 1944 would have delivered an enormous psychological boost to American pilots and sailors while devastating Japanese morale. American airmen, already confident in their machines, would have felt nearly invincible flying a fighter that outperformed every known enemy aircraft. This confidence translates directly into combat performance. Pilots fight more aggressively and make bolder tactical decisions when they believe their aircraft gives them the edge. Conversely, Japanese pilots encountering the Bearcat would have faced despair. The Zero, once feared for its agility, would have been utterly obsolete, unable to match the Bearcat's power or climb rate. Reports of its unmatched performance would have spread quickly across Japanese squadrons, eroding the will to fight and accelerating desertion or suicidal tactics. On the naval side, American crews, knowing that Bearcats patrolled above their fleets, would have felt safer and more capable, reducing combat fatigue. In total warfare, morale often determines endurance, and the Bearcat's presence would have provided the U.S. Navy with an invisible but decisive weapon: the belief that technological superiority guaranteed victory. This psychological factor alone could have made a measurable difference in the war's final year. Had the Bearcat entered combat in 1944, it would have represented both the pinnacle and the end of piston-engine fighter evolution. Its unmatched power-to-weight ratio, high climb rate, and agility would have proven that propeller aircraft still had room to advance. However, the rapid emergence of jet fighters like the German Me-2, 162, and the British Gloster Meteor signaled an inevitable shift in aviation technology. In this alternate history, the Bearcat's success might have delayed the U.S. Navy's rush toward jets by reinforcing confidence in piston designs. Navy planners could have viewed jet adoption as less urgent, preferring to refine proven technologies. Conversely, combat experience with the Bearcat might also have exposed the performance ceiling of propeller aircraft, motivating faster investment in jet research to maintain superiority. Either way, the Bearcat's early service would have played a critical role in shaping the Navy's transition strategy, potentially influencing how quickly jet-powered carrier fighters like the F9F Panther and FJ Fury entered service. The Bearcat's legacy, then, would lie not just in its wartime performance, but in its role as the technological bridge between the old and the new eras of aerial warfare. Producing the Bearcat in 1944 would have presented industrial challenges but also significant advantages. Grumman, already manufacturing large numbers of Hellcats, would have needed to retool production lines for the new design. However, given America's wartime industrial momentum, this shift could have been achieved relatively smoothly by mid-1944. The Bearcat's smaller frame required fewer materials, meaning more aircraft could be produced per ton of aluminum and steel. This efficiency could have increased U.S. Navy fighter availability across the Pacific. Maintenance crews would also have appreciated its simpler design. In access and part replacement were easier compared to the Corsair or Hellcat. Logistics chains would have been slightly strained during the transition, but once stabilized, operational readiness could have reached unprecedented levels. Furthermore, an earlier Bearcat rollout might have freed up existing Hellcats for secondary duties, such as training or escort work, optimizing overall fleet strength. Industrially, the Bearcat's 1944 introduction would have demonstrated the flexibility and resilience of American war production, proof that even late in the war, the United States could design, build, and deploy entirely new combat aircraft without slowing its momentum toward victory. If the Bearcat had fought in 1944, its combat reputation would have secured it a more prominent post, or role. In our actual timeline, it saw limited peacetime service before jets replaced it. But in this alternate history, wartime glory would have ensured the Bearcat remained in production longer, perhaps serving into the early 1950s as a primary naval fighter. Allied nations rebuilding after the war, France, Thailand, and South Vietnam, might have adopted it sooner and in larger numbers, shaping early Cold War air forces. Its combat, proven status could also have made it a valuable export, much like the later P-51 Mustang. The Bearcat's influence might have extended into air racing and civilian aviation, where its lightweight power made it ideal for post-war competition. Moreover, its dominance in the final years of World War II would have cemented Grumman's reputation as the premier naval aircraft designer, giving it the prestige needed to lead in jet development projects afterward. Thus, an early arriving Bearcat wouldn't just have been a wartime weapon. It would have become an enduring symbol of American engineering excellence and the global reach of post-war aviation technology. Beyond machines and tactics, the Bearcat's earlier appearance would have profoundly affected people who fought the war. U.S. Navy pilots, many of whom transitioned from Hellcats or Corsairs, would have enjoyed a sense of renewed pride flying the most advanced piston fighter ever built. Their survival rates likely would have risen, as the Bearcat's performance allowed for safer combat exits and superior escape capabilities. Maintenance crews would have benefited from easier repairs and faster turnarounds, reducing fatigue on long deployments. On the Japanese side, pilots would have faced demoralizing losses against an enemy aircraft they could not hope to match. For civilians in the Pacific, the faster Allied victory enabled by the Bearcat might have meant fewer bombings, fewer invasions, and less suffering overall. The war's emotional toll, already staggering, might have been slightly eased by a quicker resolution. The Bearcat, in this sense, becomes more than an aircraft. It symbolizes how human innovation and courage can compress timelines of destruction, sparing countless lives by ending conflicts sooner through decisive technological superiority. In this alternate timeline, the arrival of the F8F Bearcat in 1944 fundamentally alters the closing chapter of World War II. Its speed, climb rate, and agility revolutionized naval air warfare, giving the U.S. Navy an even sharper edge against a desperate Japanese military. Battles like Lake Gulf and Okinawa end with fewer American casualties, and the kamikaze threat is blunted far earlier. Strategically, the war may have concluded months sooner, reshaping post-war politics and accelerating the transition into the jet age. Technologically, the Bearcat becomes a bridge between propeller and jet innovation, influencing global fighter design for decades. Psychologically, it reinforces the unshakable confidence of Allied forces and the inevitability of victory. While history records the Bearcat as a fighter that arrived too late to fight, imagining its 1944 debut reveals the magnitude of its potential impact. It stands as a testament to how timing in warfare, just a few months' difference, can redefine the course of global events. The Bearcat, had it arrived earlier, might have been remembered not only as one of the best piston fighters ever built, but as the machine that helped bring World War II to an even swifter and more decisive end.